The first time I heard my father call me a burden, I was 8 years old. He didn't know I was standing outside the kitchen door. "I swear," he muttered while rubbing his forehead, "everything became harder after she was born." My mother sighed. If only she'd stop needing so much. I looked down at the drawing in my hands. It was a picture of our family. I had spent all afternoon coloring it for them. Quietly, I folded the paper in half and threw it into the trash before they ever saw it. From that day on, I stopped expecting love. Growing up, I learned to make myself invisible. If dinner was short, I told everyone I wasn't hungry. If new clothes were expensive, I wore my old ones another year. When birthdays came around, I smiled as my older brother, Ethan, opened expensive presents while I received socks or nothing at all. "You're old enough to understand," my mother would always say. "Ethan has more potential." Apparently, I didn't. No matter how hard I worked, I never seemed good enough. Straight A's. They're just grades. Captain of the debate team. That won't pay bills. Scholarship offers. You'll probably waste them. Every achievement felt like it disappeared the moment I walked through our front door. Only one person ever looked at me differently. Grandma Evelyn. She lived in a small white cottage 20 minutes away, surrounded by flowers she'd planted with Grandpa decades earlier. Whenever I visited, she hugged me like I mattered. "You've got the strongest heart in this family," she'd whisper. I never believed her. One Saturday afternoon, while helping her bake peach pies, she suddenly asked, "Do you know why people fear kind people?" I laughed. "They don't." "Oh, sweetheart." She smiled sadly. "They do." I frowned. "Why?" "Because kind people remember everything, but forgive anyway." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. Over the years, Grandma became my safe place. Whenever home became unbearable, I'd ride my old bicycle to her house. She never asked why my eyes were red. She already knew. Sometimes we'd drink tea on the porch without saying a word. Sometimes she'd tell stories about Grandpa. Sometimes she'd simply hold my hand. Those were the only moments I ever felt like someone wanted me. When I turned 22, I graduated from college at the top of my class. I received a standing ovation. Professors shook my hand. Companies offered interviews before graduation even ended. I looked into the audience, hoping my parents might finally look proud. Instead, their seats were empty. Grandma was there. Alone. She stood, clapping harder than anyone else. After the ceremony, she wrapped me in a hug. I've never been prouder. I almost cried. My parents called 3 hours later. "Sorry," Mom said casually. "Ethan's golf tournament ran late." That was it. No congratulations. No apology. Just another reminder that I came second. Always. Months later, Ethan crashed another business venture. He'd already failed 2 startups, but my parents continued pouring money into him. "This one's different," Dad insisted. "It's an investment." A month later, he asked me for money. Not because I was successful. Because Ethan needed saving. Again. "You've got a good job," Dad said. "Family helps family." I transferred nearly $15,000. Not 1 cent was ever repaid. When I gently asked about it 6 months later, Mom looked offended. "You're seriously keeping score?" Dad added, "Money changes people." I wanted to laugh. Apparently losing money didn't. Only asking for it back did. Grandma found out accidentally. She quietly reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't let generous people become surrounded by takers." I don't know how. You'll learn. I wish I'd listened sooner. A year later, Grandma's health began declining. At first it was little things. Forgotten appointments. Misplaced glasses. Long pauses in conversations. Then came the hospital visits. The diagnosis. Heart failure. The doctor tried explaining treatment options. Grandma simply smiled. "I've lived a beautiful life." I visited every evening after work. Sometimes we'd play cards. Sometimes she'd nap while I read aloud. One rainy Tuesday, she handed me an old brass key. "This opens something important." I looked confused. "What is it?" "You'll know." "Why not tell me now?" "Because timing matters." She closed my fingers around the key. "Promise me something." "Anything. When people finally show you who they really are." She looked directly into my eyes. "Believe them." Those words stayed with me. 3 weeks later, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was packed. Neighbors, church friends, old co-workers. Everyone had stories about her kindness. My parents cried loudly. Ethan cried louder. I simply couldn't cry at all. It felt like the safest place I'd ever known had disappeared. After the service, everyone gathered at Grandma's house. While people shared memories over coffee, my father disappeared upstairs. Then Ethan. Then Mom. I didn't think much of it until I walked into Grandma's bedroom. Every drawer had been opened. The closet doors hung wide open. Boxes sat scattered across the floor. "What are you doing?" I asked. Dad didn't even look embarrassed. "Just organizing." Ethan snorted. "We're checking if Grandma left anything valuable." My stomach turned. "She was buried 3 hours ago." Mom shrugged. "Life goes on." I stared at the 3 people I'd spent my entire life trying to please. Not one of them looked ashamed. Then Ethan held up an old jewelry box. Nothing but junk. He tossed it onto the bed. Something inside snapped. Not the jewelry. Me. I picked up the box carefully and closed the lid. This was Grandma's. So show some respect." Dad rolled his eyes. "You're always so dramatic." I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked outside. The fresh air didn't help. I sat on Grandma's porch, holding the little brass key she'd given me weeks earlier. What did it open? Why had she trusted only me with it? As I turned the key over in my hand, something caught my eye. Underneath the porch swing was a tiny metal lockbox I'd never noticed before. My heart began pounding. The key looked exactly the right size. I knelt on the wooden floorboards, slipped the brass key into the lock, and heard a soft click. Inside the box was a thick sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting. Beneath it lay a small flash drive. And taped to the envelope was a single handwritten note. "Don't let them see this until you've read every word." I froze. Because at that exact moment, I heard my father's voice behind me. "What did you just find?" My family called me a burden for years, until Grandma's final gift turned my life around. Part 2. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I slipped the envelope and flash drive beneath my jacket just as my father stepped onto the porch. "What did you just find?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. I forced a shrug. "Nothing. Just an old box with gardening tools." He glanced under the porch but didn't bother looking closely. "If you find anything valuable," he said, "it belongs to the family." I looked him in the eye for the first time in years. It belonged to Grandma. Without another word, I walked to my car. The entire drive home, the envelope rested on the passenger seat. I didn't open it until I was sitting alone in my apartment. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My sweet Emma, if you're reading this, then my time here has ended. I wish I could hug you one last time, but I hope these words are enough. First, I need you to know something. You were never a burden. Not for one single day. You were the brightest light this family was ever given. Unfortunately, some people only recognize light after they've spent years trying to dim it. I watched them ignore you. I watched them praise your brother while overlooking every sacrifice you made. I spoke to them more times than you know. Nothing changed. So I made other plans. There is a flash drive in this envelope. Watch it before you tell anyone about this letter. Everything you need is there. And remember, love should never have to be earned." Grandma. Tears blurred my vision. She had seen everything. Every lonely birthday. Every broken promise. Every moment I wondered if something was wrong with me. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A video appeared. Grandma smiled warmly from her favorite chair. "Hello, sweetheart." I burst into tears. "If you're watching this," she continued, "then I've finally gotten some peace." She explained that 3 years earlier, she'd updated her will. She had done it quietly, without telling anyone. "I knew your parents expected to inherit everything," she said. "But I also knew who truly deserved a chance." She held up several documents. "I've left you my home, my savings, and every acre of land your grandfather and I owned." I gasped. The cottage alone was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The farmland was worth even more. But she wasn't finished. I also left each member of the family a letter. She smiled knowingly. "They'll receive theirs after my attorney reads my will." The video ended with one final sentence. "Never feel guilty for accepting the love someone freely gives you." The following Monday, our family gathered in the attorney's office. My parents looked confident. Ethan was already talking about renovating Grandma's house. The attorney adjusted his glasses. "We'll begin with the personal letters." Dad's smile faded as he read his. Mom stared silently at hers. Ethan's face turned bright red. Finally, the attorney cleared his throat. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter leaves her residence, investment accounts, farmland, personal belongings, and remaining assets." He looked directly at me. "To her granddaughter, Emma Carter." Silence. Complete silence. "What?" Ethan shouted. "That has to be a mistake." Dad slammed both hands on the table. "She would never do that." The attorney calmly slid the signed documents across the table. They were witnessed and notarized. Mom turned toward me. "You manipulated her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I did what?" "You visited her every day," she snapped. "You filled her head with lies." The attorney interrupted. "Actually." He pressed a button on his computer. Grandma's recorded video filled the room. She spoke clearly. No one pressured me. This was entirely my decision. "I've watched Emma give without expecting anything in return. I've watched the rest of you take without gratitude." Dad's face turned pale. Grandma continued. "This inheritance isn't a reward. It's protection." The room fell silent again. No one argued after that. There was nothing left to say. Over the next several weeks, my parents called constantly. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they apologized. Sometimes they demanded money. Their words changed. Their motives didn't. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer. Instead, I moved into Grandma's cottage. Every room reminded me of her. Her rocking chair still sat beside the fireplace. Her favorite teacup rested beside the sink. The garden she loved had become overgrown, so every evening after work, I pulled weeds and planted new flowers. It felt like healing. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I discovered another small wooden box. Inside were dozens of letters. Every birthday card I'd ever made Grandma. Every drawing I'd thought had been thrown away. Even the family picture I'd tossed into the trash when I was 8 years old. She had rescued it. On the back she'd written, "One day she'll know she was always enough." I cried harder than I had at the funeral. Months later, I used part of the inheritance to create the Evelyn Hope Scholarship, helping students whose families couldn't support their dreams. At the first award ceremony, I looked across the room and saw nervous young faces filled with hope. I smiled because I knew exactly what it felt like to believe no one believed in you. Before each student left, I handed them a small envelope. Inside was the same sentence Grandma had once written to me. "You were never a burden." Years have passed since then. My parents still send messages every Christmas. Sometimes they're apologies. Sometimes they're requests. I wish them well, but I keep my distance. Forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation. As for Grandma's cottage, it's still home. Every spring, the garden blooms brighter than the year before. Whenever I sit on the porch swing at sunset, I think about the little brass key she placed in my hand. I once believed it unlocked a hidden box. Now I know it unlocked something far more valuable. It unlocked the truth. I was never the burden my family claimed I was. I was simply surrounded by people who couldn't see my worth. Thankfully, one extraordinary grandmother saw enough for all of them. And because of her final gift, I finally learned to see it too.